Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
Hi, I'm Ashley, a true crime fanatic.
I'm Dan, and I don't know anything about true crime.
Together, we host Fuck That, a true crime podcast that covers cases that highlight important topics that are often overlooked, such as wrongful convictions, domestic violence, and social inequities, sprinkled in with the occasional case with spooky themes. If you are looking for your next true crime fix delivered candidly with a hint of sarcasm, you can listen and subscribe to bi-weekly episodes of Fuck That wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to give us a follow on Facebook and Twitter at @FThatPod and at @FThat_pod on Instagram.
Devil is on his way, devil is on his way, devil is on his way, motherfucker, the devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees, devil is on his way. Fall to your knees, devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees, devil is on his way.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, Dylan.
Hey, what up?
How are you?
I'm doing great.
Did you ride the storm out?
Yeah, I don't know. They say there was a big storm. Everything was soaked outside, but I think I slept through it.
I think I did as well. I woke up this morning, didn't even realize there had been a storm until a friend asked, "You guys okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess."
We made it.
It does look like tornadoes hit some parts of the southern United States.
Oh, yeah. They looked terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, some devastation.
So hopefully our Mountain Murders fam is safe. We wish you the best.
Yeah, if you see a tornado, get away from it.
That's great. That's sage advice.
That's my advice.
Great advice, Dylan. Other than that, how you doing, Dill?
I'm doing pretty good.
You're doing great, huh? Just tickled pink to be here, podcasting,
Yeah, I'm
discussing true crime.
Of course. It's one of my favorite pastimes, and I'm just putting along.
It seems this week one of your favorite pastimes is making fun of my spray tan.
Well, I mean, what do you think about it?
All right. I've never had a spray tan ever in my whole life. And one of my 2 gym memberships offers a spray tan, right?
Right.
I had this brilliant idea. Well, it's warm weather. I'm wearing a lot of shorts. I'm hitting the gym every day. Maybe I should get a spray tan because my legs are very pasty white. Very, very pasty. Translucent.
Well, I just think it's your complexion, and I think it's great.
Yeah, you can see through my skin to the blue veins. So I get this spray tan, and I've never had one before, so I didn't really know what to expect. And I will admit, it didn't go as maybe I had hoped. My hands are pretty orange.
Yeah.
As well as my knees and elbows. But you've not been very supportive at all with this spray tan.
Well, I gotta say, I've always thought that spray tans are kind of goofy. Honestly, it's not that hard to get a little color if you think you need some. And I personally,
but it is hard for me to get a little color.
Well, I think people should just the way they are is beautiful, and you shouldn't try to change it. That's what I think.
I hate you.
And I felt like, having worked in light construction and things like that all my life, I didn't think the spray tan was going to go that great. I felt like there was going.
How does working in construction make you an authority on spray tans?
I've sprayed stuff on things a lot.
You mean like spray painting?
Well, various chemicals.
Oh.
Over the years, okay?
I thought maybe you meant bodily fluids, and I'm like, I don't need to know what you were doing 20 years ago.
I figured there would be some running. You get little drips here and there, maybe a inappropriate buildup of in certain areas. So I don't know.
You said my legs don't look that bad.
No, your legs look pretty good.
It's just everything else looks goofy.
Well, your elbows and your hands, and your knees. Well, your knees aren't too bad, but.
I know you keep making fun of my dirty little hands.
It looks like a hobbit hand.
I said,
Jesus.
well, you know what? My dirty little hands, that will fade, but you always going to have a bald spot, Dylan.
Yeah, I know.
Below the belt.
You don't have to get personal, but your little hands, they're grubby looking right now.
Cool.
You know? They're a little dirty little.
Your hands always look grubby. Maybe you should put some lotion on them little dried up prune hands of yours.
Oh my gosh, one spray tan and she's an authority on dryness.
You're an authority on spraying stuff because you worked at light construction. I mean, come on, dude.
I could have done a better job. I'm telling you, I would have gave you a more even coat. I would have took particular attention to the areas that there may be build up.
It's a machine, Dylan. It wasn't a person spraying me. Okay, so the machine did not take time like you would. Okay.
Yeah. See,
machine versus man.
See, yeah, maybe if you get an in-person spray.
No, I don't want someone looking at my body.
They can just take it easy.
I don't want to expose people to this body.
Well, I'll spray you.
Can't handle it.
I'll spray you, baby.
So yeah, that's been my week. I'm just being like taunted by Dylan.
No, you're just waiting for it to fade.
And his bald spot.
You're just waiting for it to fade away.
Yeah.
Yup.
Thanks for that.
All right. So what do you have in store for us today?
I have a case that I feel like maybe people have heard of this story because it was big news, but maybe don't know all the details of the case.
Okay.
So I'm excited to kind of get into this and see what you think.
Okay, that sounds awesome.
Amy Bishop, a neurobiologist at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, sat down for a meeting on February 12th of 2010. It was around 3 p.m., and the biology department's conference room was filled with 13 professors and staff members. They were located on the third floor, which was a windowless room at the Shelby Center for Science and Technology. Gopi Padilla, the department chair and a plant biologist, headed up the meeting. He began by sending around a printed agenda for everyone to follow. Dr. Amy Bishop was seated next to him by the door. 45-year-old Amy Bishop was normally a vocal participant at these meetings. However, on this February afternoon, colleagues noticed she seemed to be brooding. This wasn't, I guess, unexpected. And I'll tell you why, Dylan. Amy is in her feelings a little bit, Dylan. You ever been in your feelings?
I've been deep in my feels before.
A year earlier, the department had denied Dr. Bishop's bid for tenure. She had appealed the decision, but was no step closer to tenure. It had been denied. When the spring semester ended in a few months, Dr. Bishop would be out of a job. Over the years, Dr. Bishop, a Harvard graduate, had shown evidence that the smallest slights could set off a disproportionate and occasionally violent reaction, according to numerous interviews with colleagues and others who had known her. Those who knew Amy said her life seemed to veer wildly between moments of cold fury and scientific brilliance, between rage at perceived slights and empathy for her students.
Wow, sounds like she's all over the place.
Amy was no stranger to law enforcement. In 2002, she was charged with assault after punching a woman in the head at an International House of Pancakes, also known as IHOP, in Peabody, Massachusetts, for taking the last child booster seat. According to the police report, she demanded the seat for one of her children while shouting, "I am Dr. Amy Bishop."
You're Dr. Amy Bishop, but you're getting in trouble for fighting at an IHOP.
Yes, very, very classy stuff. There are other brushes with law enforcement, which we're going to get into momentarily, but each time it seemed that Dr. Bishop emerged unscathed. No one at the University of Alabama, Huntsville knew of these incidents. However, neighbors and acquaintances were very aware of her mood swings and volatility. So in the neighborhood, Amy was known to yell at playing children.
Okay.
She rarely kept opinions to herself. She rejected criticism and was known to have fudged on her resume. Amy's scientific work was not as impressive as she made it out to be, with independent neurobiologists stating it was, quote, unlikely she would get the opportunity to try for tenure at any major university. Students described cyclical freakouts that pushed one graduate student after another out of her laboratory. Dr. Hugo Gonzalez Cerratos, a professor of physiology at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, had once collaborated with Dr. Bishop on a paper while working together at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. When the paper was completed, Dr. Gonzalo Cerratos said Bishop flew into a rage. Quote, "She was very angry because she had not been the first author."
Why would that matter? If you're all named as co-authors and getting credit for the work, it's such a silly thing to be that mad over.
Her contract with the cardiology department at the hospital, which was associated with Harvard, was not renewed. Others recalled working with Amy Bishop as being painful and that she was always seemingly on the verge of exploding.
Oh, gosh. I hate being around people like that.
So let's talk a little bit about Amy's background. Amy Bishop was born April 24th, 1965 in Braintree, Massachusetts to Samuel and Judith. Sam was raised by Greek immigrants in Somerville and joined the Air Force in 1954, where he changed his name from Sotor Papazagoulis to Samuel Bishop. He wanted a more American-sounding name. Judith was born to a pretty well-off New England family who owned a shoe factory. Their backgrounds were described as being, pretty opposite. Like she kind of came from money in this upscale neighborhood, wealthy family, very privileged, and he grew up with a poor working class family.
Okay.
When Amy was 3 years old, her family welcomed a baby boy, Seth. As a child, Amy was described by her parents as bright. She arranged her toys in elaborate formations as if they were on parade. And this struck me. This is something that my autistic son has done since early childhood and continues to do. He arranges his toys in lines and formations.
Right.
You've seen this.
Yeah.
So it almost makes me wonder if Amy could be on the spectrum.
Maybe. Which, a lot of kids play like that, but very seldom do they have very specific details that they continue to do. You know what I mean?
They lived in Iowa until 1968 when Sam was offered a teaching position. Seth was born that year as well. So that's when they leave Iowa and they move back to Braintree, to the Boston area. Amy's father was a professor in the art department at Northeastern University. He taught film. Judith was considered a keen equestrian who was heavily involved in local politics. Judith was affable and outgoing. She was active in church and town affairs. Judith was a town meeting member as well as a volunteer with the League of Women Voters. She's said to have a lot of political connections and kind of sway in the community. Quote, "They were just a nice family raising nice kids," one town member described. Amy was asthmatic and her childhood was plagued by trips to the emergency room. Her attraction to science seemed to be a byproduct of this affliction as Amy longed for a cure and had hoped that maybe one day she could figure out what causes asthma and ways to prevent it.
Well, she's not playing around, right? I have this issue. No one's found a good answer yet. Maybe I can be that person.
At Braintree High School, Amy and her brother Seth were excellent students. Not only was Amy exceptional academically, but also an accomplished violinist. She began taking lessons when she was in the 3rd grade. Soon after, Seth asked Judith if he could play too. It has been suggested that there was a bit of sibling rivalry between Amy and Seth. Bookish Amy seemed to take after her father, Samuel, while Seth was considered more outdoorsy like his mother. Yet others say that Amy doted on her little brother. There probably wasn't any jealousy in the household. Being a smart kid in Braintree, which is a working class town, people weren't really surprised that Amy was a loner. Seth seemed to be a bit more social than his sister. He would try to make friends and found friendship in a fellow train enthusiast named Paul Agnew. They both loved trains, and Seth was known to pedal his bike all over Braintree, visiting different train
trying to catch
tracks
the trains.
Yeah, and just kind of going to different, I guess, intersections and following the train tracks, picking up maybe little pieces that had fallen off the train, that kind of stuff.
Now, we've been around some train enthusiasts before, and they're pretty big time on the trains.
They are.
Very, very excited to see the trains coming.
They are. Absolutely. My son loves a train. And we found a train club where we live because there's a lot of train action here. And
Yes.
those folks were very informative. They had a great, vast knowledge of trains and train history. Wow. We learned a lot.
We
didn't
did.
Dylan?
We did learn a lot.
I mean, I thought it was pretty cool
No, that's cool.
to know about all the different like steam engines and coal and yeah. I mean, trains did play a huge part in our American history.
Well, yeah. I mean, early on and for many, many years, they were a very key part of expansion and, moving goods all over the nation.
Now, when Seth got a girlfriend during his senior year of high school, Amy had already left for college in Boston, but this girlfriend, who's been named as Melissa, said she felt really out of place and that she got the impression Amy didn't approve of her, that no one would be good enough for Amy's brother. The Bishop family also seemed to be almost clannish, as if they were just this singular unit or like this unit, and that they would never accept like outsiders into this family unit.
Oh.
This is what the girlfriend said she kind of felt by this family.
Well, that's kind of weird.
It is strange, but I mean, I have met people who do give me that impression and that do seem to almost exert this control over their sons or daughters and do have this feeling that no one will be good enough for their child, and that even if you did become like a spouse, you would never fully be welcomed into the family. I mean, I've seen that kind of play out.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to want the best for your children as far as partner goes and hope they can have a good life, a good solid life, happy. But and you can give advice or gently encourage and things like that, but to think that you have the full-on right to choose a person for your son or daughter or whatever, it's pretty weird.
Or just to kind of go out of your way to like make your son-in-law or daughter-in-law feel rejected.
Right.
Or like you're never going to be accepted into our family. I mean, like, I just don't understand that. This is the person your child is with. That's like the last thing you should do is kind of make someone feel uncomfortable like that.
It's very strange.
I don't understand it, but who am I? Amy was considered quiet, almost invisible at the high school. Despite the 3-year age gap between she and Seth, they were pretty close. Amy would even credit her brother with saving her life while they were on a hike one time. Amy fell down a cliff. With his knowledge of physics, Seth was able to pull her up despite having what was described as a small frame and essentially saved her.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, they both chose their father's university when it was time for college. Amy majored in biology, and then Seth started in the engineering program. So fast forward, Dylan, to 1986. What were you doing in 1986?
Oh, gosh. Well, I would only be 8 years old.
You're
so
probably like playing He-Man or
I
something.
was probably picking my nose or something.
Probably poking a stick somewhere, like poking some ants or something, an anthill or something.
No, I would never hurt little bugs like that for no reason.
Probably setting a fire.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you were a little pyro. I was 6, so I was probably like...
You was down playing in the creek or something,
I
right?
probably was, making a mud pie. On December 6th of 1986, Amy Bishop, then 21, she was home for Christmas break from college. She and her father had some kind of argument, the nature of which has never publicly been disclosed. And he would later say whatever the argument was about, it was of no consequence, or else he would have remembered it.
Okay.
Okay.
Your argument was of no consequence.
Exactly. Okay, so he left to go do some Christmas shopping, and Judith had gotten up really early to go out horseback riding. 18-year-old Seth stayed home to wash his car. Amy went upstairs and loaded the pump-action shotgun that her father had bought after their house had been burglarized. I think it was like a year earlier, maybe their house had been broken into. A lot of their stuff had been stolen.
So he purchased a weapon for home protection.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like this kind of left a mark on the family. She would later tell police that she wanted to make sure she knew how it worked in case anyone ever broke in the house again. If the family argument had something to do with her decision to grab the gun, she's never, let on. Accidentally or intentionally, Amy Bishop fired the gun in her parents' room. She tried to cover up the holes in the wall with a metal Band-Aid box and a book jacket. I'm not exactly sure how that would work.
So she's
Because when I first was looking into this, I was like, so did she take the Band-Aids and try to plug up the hole?
Right.
But so I'm not exactly sure what she was trying to jerry-rig here.
So she's discharged the weapon.
Yes.
Got a hole in the wall now.
Yeah.
Probably a significant hole, I would think. And she's trying to cover it up.
Yeah, somehow. So she's trying to do this, which is very strange. Soon, Judith came home for lunch. By this time, Seth had finished washing the car. He had run out for some groceries and had returned to the house. He had just turned on the TV in the living room and was coming back into the kitchen when Amy came downstairs. The event in which Amy fired at least 3 shots from a pump-action 12-gauge shotgun has been full of differing accounts over the years. But what we know is that Amy shot and killed her 18-year-old brother, Seth.
Damn.
According to Judith, Amy had asked her mother to help unload the gun. However, Amy would later tell law enforcement that she had asked her brother to help and that the gun had gone off, accidentally killing Seth. After firing shots that killed her brother, Amy fled the house. She ran to the Dave Dinger Ford dealership, where she held 2 employees, Tom Pettigrew and Jeff Doyle, at gunpoint while demanding that they supply her with a getaway car.
Come on down to Dave Dinger Ford.
During this incident, Amy told the hostages, quote, her husband was coming to get her and she needed to flee.
And now, so she's 15 at this point?
She's 21.
21?
Yeah.
Oh, she was 3 years older than her brother. Okay.
Yes. So as paramedics tried to revive her son, Judy spoke to the police. She mentioned that Seth had just returned from the grocery store and that she was in the kitchen with him when Amy came downstairs carrying the shotgun, and that Amy said to me, quote, I have a shell in the gun and I don't know how to unload it. I told Amy not to point the gun at anybody, but somehow she swung the weapon around to show it to her brother and the gun fired. Their kitchen was small and Amy had been standing close to her brother, so the shot hit Seth point blank. When he collapsed, Judy told the police Amy fled.
Damn.
Yeah. So officers put out a bulletin, and then not long after, Amy was picked up outside that dealership. She was taken, of course, into police custody. Police found Amy with that loaded shotgun, which in some reports it's been described that she was pointing it at law enforcement, which is a surefire way to get yourself killed.
Well, yeah.
But they eventually coerced her into putting the gun down, and they were, taking her into custody. While Amy was being processed at the Braintree police station, Judith Bishop barged in. Judith was friends with police chief John Polio. She demanded that her daughter be released immediately. A member of the police department remembered at the time there were many officers who were, quote, frustrated over the release. Some officers believed that Chief Polio had essentially covered up a murder, which resulted in a miscarriage of justice simply because he was friends with Judith Bishop.
Okay.
So Amy is let go. No charges filed.
After shooting her brother with a shotgun?
Yeah.
And then threatening people at the Ford dealership?
Yeah.
Damn. That's crazy.
Yeah. So it's been reported that the files relating to the shooting disappeared from the Braintree Police Department. Amy was never charged for the shooting death of her brother Seth. It was ruled as accidental at the time. Now, after the Christmas vacation shooting death of her younger brother, Amy returned to college at Northeastern University, where she graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Biology in 1988. During this time, Amy had met a fellow biologist named James Anderson. Eventually, they married at All Souls Church, which is the same church where her brother's funeral had taken place just a few years earlier.
That's pretty weird.
The pair remained in the Boston area, eventually buying a home on Birch Lane in Ipswich, which is located along the northern shore, or known as the North Shore of Massachusetts. The couple had 4 children. On the day the couple moved into the neighborhood, they drove over like a community basketball hoop. Later, Amy would joke that she was really happy to have removed it. Like, okay.
So they just run it over?
Yeah. I guess with the moving truck or something.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Amy scowled at kids on skateboards and loathed the sound of the ice cream truck driving by. She and James were never invited to block parties. Can't imagine why.
Yeah.
Amy frequently called police with noise complaints, either on the neighbors or their children.
But look, you should have moved in the middle of nowhere then, if you're this against noise and kids playing and just your neighbors living their life.
She seems to just like have a problem with everybody. Amy took various positions in different labs at Boston hospitals, and in 1993, she earned a PhD in genetics from Harvard University. Amy would spend the next 9 years in various fellowships and instructor positions at Harvard Medical School, the Harvard School of Public Health, Longwood Medical Area, and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. We got to talk about this, Dylan. So, Dr. Amy Bishop, in 1993, after she receives her PhD, she goes to work at the Boston Children's Hospital's neurobiology lab. Her supervisor, Dr. Paul Rosenberg, a Harvard medical professor and a physician at the Children's Hospital, he did not get along with Amy at all. They were like oil and water. He ends up giving Amy a negative evaluation of her work. Dr. Rosenberg felt that Amy, quote, did not meet the standards required for the work. Now, upon receiving this brutal evaluation, Amy was extremely agitated and resigned from the position. In December of 1994, Dr. Rosenberg and his wife, an attorney, return to their home in Newton, Massachusetts after a Caribbean vacation. A pile of mail had accumulated during their absence, and as Dr. Rosenberg was sorting it out, he noticed a parcel. Using a knife to cut around the top of the package, he was able to peer inside the box, and that's when he saw 2 cylinders wired with 9-volt batteries and concluded it was 2 pipe bombs.
Oh, damn.
Because he'd taken care to cut the box open, the cardboard flaps that were supposed to detonate the bomb didn't touch, so therefore the bomb did not go off. Dr. Rosenberg grabbed his wife and they ran out of the house. At a neighbor's, they were able to call 911. Luckily, no one was harmed. Now, Amy and her husband, James, became top suspects in the case.
So it was a real device. It had potential to harm or kill someone.
Yes.
That is so scary.
Yes. And this was around the time of, I guess, the Unabomber, that kind of thing happening. And so, of course, Dr. Rosenberg was very concerned. The ATF ends up getting involved in this case, starts investigating it. They were questioned. Amy and James were questioned by law enforcement. They provided handwriting samples as required, but they refused to take polygraph exams. Dr. Rosenberg had suggested that Amy might be mentally unstable and that her coworkers had feared that she might become violent. And I guess, he expressed this to the ATF. One witness even told the ATF agents that Bishop's loyal husband, James Anderson, had even talked about getting revenge by hurting Dr. Rosenberg. And they had heard him make threats.
I just don't get how you go from someone critiquing your work or something seemingly kind of not really a big deal. I know it's a big deal to get hammered when you're in these types of circles, as far as your peer reviews or your mentor, if you will, slamming you and to everyone else. But still, wanting to kill them for that is a very extreme behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, come on.
When investigators tried to talk to Bishop in April of 1995 regarding this pipe bomb, she refused to let them in the house. They had to break a window out. Investigators found items in the Bishop Anderson home that could be used to make a pipe bomb, including a common epoxy, but lab tests failed to tie the goods found inside the house to this bomb. Records of electronic surveillance made at the time of the investigation have been sealed. So, we don't know what's on those electronic records. During their investigation into the mail bomb, law enforcement discovered a novel written on Amy's computer about a woman who had killed her brother, then tried to redeem herself by becoming a top scientist.
That's not weird.
Yeah, right. Well, the pipe bomb case was never solved due to a lack of evidence. While living in Ipswich, Massachusetts, Amy was a member of the Hamilton Writing Club. Amy had written 3 unpublished novels, all about a female scientist who worked to defeat a pandemic virus and struggled with suicidal thoughts after not getting tenure. Amy would brag to group members about being related to John Irving, the author who wrote Cider House Rules. He was allegedly her mother's cousin, and she would tell people she hoped Irving would help secure a book deal for her. Some writers respected Amy and her work, while others thought she bragged too often about her Harvard education and that she complained far too often about having to drive a, quote, beat-up Chrysler.
Well, whose fault is that?
Yeah, well, guess what? Go get a car loan and pay a note like everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, what are you doing?
Okay.
If you don't like your car, get another car.
Well, it was, I guess the thing was like, I'm a Harvard-educated doctor, I shouldn't have to drive a beat-up car because, everybody owes her something because she's smart.
Right. Well, she's not smart enough to figure out how to get another car.
Yeah, I guess not. Now, in 2000, or smart enough to get a real job, right? Now, in 2003, Amy would leave New England for the Deep South. She was offered a position as a professor in the Department of Biology at the University of Alabama, Huntsville. Amy and James sold their house in Ipswich and moved to Huntsville, Alabama, relocating to a neighborhood called Terra.
Now, and this is probably quite different environment.
I'm sure it is. I guess I just giggled a little bit that the subdivision was called Terra. Like someone must have been a huge Gone with the Wind fan.
Oh, okay.
Plus, that just seems kind of like maybe like a tone deaf name for a neighborhood. I don't know.
And so I'm sure it's completely different than where they're moving from there in Massachusetts, right?
Yankees at Terra? I won't think about it now. Yeah.
Massachusetts to Alabama.
Yeah. So
Okay.
you got some mass holes moving down south. Harvard-trained Bishop must have seemed a great academic catch for the University of Alabama, Huntsville. Founded only in 1969, the state school has made a name for itself in astrophysics and aerospace engineering, but isn't exactly prestigious beyond rocket science. The biology department hoped its Ivy League hire would help boost the school's profile in the life sciences area. Things didn't start out well. Students and faculty response to Bishop were mixed. Amy had hoped she would be able to achieve tenure. Now, for most academics, Dylan, a tenured position is the goal. Tenure guarantees job stability, meaning that a college or university can't fire a tenured professor without presenting some sort of evidence that, like the professor is incompetent or that they've behaved unprofessionally. To become a tenured professor, the average probationary period is usually like 3 years for community college and 7 at a 4-year school. People who are denied tenure at the end of this period lose their jobs. So it's kind of considered an up or out process. Like either you are moved up or they move you out. There's no room for you here if you're subpar.
Okay.
Amy published only 6 papers during her time at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, which is about half the number a biologist seeking tenure would normally be expected to produce. Strangely, she listed her 3 children as lead authors on a paper she published on laboratory-grown nerve cells and antidepressants. She was the 4th author, her husband, a computer engineer, the 5th.
So the whole family.
The whole family wrote this paper.
Oh, that's cool. That's sweet.
It's pretty strange, unusual.
Well, I don't think they were actually doing the research with her.
Yes, my toddler helped publish this paper. I'm going to publish a paper and I'm going to author. Rufus is going to be one of the authors.
He deserves it after all his hard work.
He's really smart. Yeah. The kitty also, she licked the paper, so she should be part of it too. Now, members of the faculty found Amy difficult. She was not well liked. During a lecture she gave as part of her tenure evaluation, Amy failed to impress the 10-panel tenure committee. Dr. Bishop had also received numerous complaints from graduate students who felt she was an ineffective teacher. Many had transferred out of her lab or were just dismissed by Amy. Like if they had a disagreement, she would kick them out of her lab. In March 2009, the university denied Amy Bishop tenure. She'd need to start another job. After classes ended in spring of 2010, she'd have to go find something else. Amy filed an appeal and complained to anyone who would listen. Already older than most professors seeking tenure, Dr. Bishop seemed to have thought that all of her work in Boston would somehow grant her this tenure at this Southern university. Because, like, I'm important. I'm from the city. I came from Harvard. It's, like, mine by right.
Right. Like, if the only reason I wouldn't be tenured is if I chose not to be.
Yes.
Like, they could never not offer me the position.
Yes. Now, beyond the stress and ego at play in this tenure fight, Dr. Bishop may have been worried about her family's financial state as well. Her husband, James Anderson, was working only part-time, so that made Amy the breadwinner. BizTech, the company that Anderson worked for, secured over $1 million to develop a cell incubator that Bishop had designed. BizTech CEO Dick Reeves reportedly expected Bishop to make a lot of money through this incubator, and he insisted that the tenure denials shouldn't have caused her any financial anxiety. But other experts say the industry has no real need for this $30,000 device that essentially functioned as a petri dish.
Okay.
And was pretty useless.
So it's like a fancy petri dish.
Yeah, that, no one's going to spend $30,000 on it. Relations with her colleagues continued to deteriorate. James Anderson claimed the biology faculty members sent his wife, quote, nasty emails. In September of 2009, Bishop filed a complaint with the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Someone in her department that had commented on her tenure, I guess it was part of the tenure committee, and had commented on her interview or whatever, called her crazy in a review and would not retract this statement when an administrator gave him a chance to back down from it. The professor maintained that Bishop's unstable mental health was apparent on their first meeting. He said, quote, I said she was crazy multiple times, and I stand by that. The woman had a pattern of erratic behavior. She did things that were not normal. She was out of touch with reality.
Damn.
Yeah.
He's doubling down.
Yeah. He's like, I ain't going to change my statement. That bitch crazy.
She cray. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me put down crazy.
So we're back to the morning of February 12th, 2010. Remember, Amy is in this departmental meeting.
Right.
Well, that morning, Amy Bishop taught her Introduction to Neuroscience class. She warned her graduate students that the class would be cut short, But she did, in fact, lecture the full period. Students report that Bishop seemed to ramble that day and that she was more confused than usual, and that when they asked her whether or not they were expected to attend her class on President's Day, she didn't really give them an answer.
So she's acting a bit odd, right? I think it's
Yeah.
safe to say.
Student Rena Webb would later say that she saw a cylinder that she thought could have maybe been part of a gun in Dr. Bishop's bag. Now, after class, Bishop went home for a couple of hours, and her husband dropped her off on campus again around 3 p.m. She and all 12 of her departmental colleagues crowded into that small conference room on the 3rd floor of the Shelby Center for Science and Technology for the staff meeting. For 50 minutes, Bishop sat in the meeting saying nothing. Then, just as the meeting was about to adjourn, Dr. Bishop pulls out a 9mm Ruger semi-automatic and shoots Gobi Padilla in the head.
Damn.
The blast was described as, quote, deafening. She fired again, hitting Department Assistant Stephanie Montecicolo. Next, she turned the gun on Dr. Adriel Johnson, a cell biologist. As the chaos unfolded, people were screaming, they ducked for cover, or tried clambering toward the only door. Amy aimed at a 4th colleague, Maria Ragland Davis, a biochemist named Deborah Moriarty, who had considered herself friends with Amy since they met back in 2003. They often spoke of their children. I mean, she considered this to be like her friend.
Right.
Moriarty had voted against Amy's tenure, but they had remained cordial. She dove under the table. Deborah grabbed Amy's legs and shouted, "Amy, don't do this. Think of my daughter. Think of my grandson." Amy Bishop looked down at her, quote, friend, and turned the gun on Deborah Moriarty. Moriarty heard click, then another click. The gun was jammed. Moriarty crawled past Amy and down the hallway. Amy followed behind her, repeatedly squeezing the trigger and worked the gun, but seemed to be like unable to fix it. Deborah Moriarty was able to scramble back into the conference room and secure the door along with another colleague, and they barricaded themselves inside this conference room. A prosecutor would later say, quote, "It looked like a bomb had gone off, like a war zone." 6 people were shot, 3 of them fatally. The entire event lasted less than 1 minute.
Damn, that's what's so scary about stuff like that. Because you have one person armed, no one else is, typically. And no one expects that kind of violence out of nowhere. Even if they don't like someone, even if they hate someone, a coworker, you don't expect this type of thing to happen. It's the last thing you would ever imagine.
No. Dr. Amy Bishop went downstairs to the ladies' room where she rinsed off the gun and stuffed it along with a blood-stained blazer into a trash can. Amy then casually walked into a science lab where she asked a student if she could borrow his cell phone. The unsuspecting student agreed. Amy called her husband, James, and said, quote, "I'm done," which indicated she was ready to be picked up from the Shelby Science Center. Now, no one knows if this "I'm done," like if he knew what she was going to do.
Right.
Or if this was just "I'm ready to be picked up." But a lot of people speculate that he absolutely knew what she was planning. And that he may have even helped her plan it.
That's crazy.
Because of past,
Because he's always kind of supported his wife and all these
support, yes.
arguments and complaints against the system towards her.
Yeah. Now, when she leaves the building, Amy departs through a loading dock in the back. This is where she's apprehended by a sheriff's deputy. When asked about the shooting, Amy said, quote, "It didn't happen. There's no way. They're still alive."
Okay.
Maria, so let's talk a little bit about these victims. Maria Ragland Davis was 50. She was the first shot in the head. She had a love of animals. She had a pet duck that used to follow her around as she grew up in Detroit. And that's what led her to biology, where she specialized in cell and developmental biology. Even after she suffered a bout with breast cancer that jeopardized her studies at the North Carolina State University at NC State, she still continued to fight through to earn her degrees. So, I mean, she sounds like an awesome person.
Yeah, that's admirable. You're having this, these major issues yourself. It's real easy to use as an excuse to, give up on some other hard work. But she didn't let that stop her.
Dr. Gopi Padilla, department chair, he was 52. He was shot in the chest. He had left India to earn advanced degrees at Louisiana State University and at Indiana State, where he studied tree genomics. He had supported Bishop's bid for tenure. He had been one of the few that thought she should stay. Biochemistry professor Joseph Nguyen recalls that Padilla cared about all of his colleagues and had urged him to start a family so that he could pass on his knowledge and love to his own children. Padilla left behind a wife and 2 teenage daughters. Dr. Ariel Johnston, 52, was also shot in the head. She was an associate professor specializing in cell biology and nutritional pathology. I'm sorry, did I say she? I meant he. He had been an Eagle Scout. He was an assistant scoutmaster for his son's troops and was often known for teaching the Boy Scouts about science. Molecular biologist Luis Veracruz, 42, was hit in the chest, but was later released the same day from the hospital. Joseph Leahy was shot in the head as well. He was a microbiologist, 50 years old. They had to send him to the neurointensive unit before he could be released. So he had some pretty serious injuries. And then staff member Stephanie Montecicolo, she's 62. She was taking notes at the meeting. Unfortunately, she was shot in the face, but managed to survive the shooting.
Wow.
Now, none of the surviving witnesses disputed that Amy Bishop was the gunman. Or the gun woman. The gun person.
The gunner.
The gunner. The media, of course, descended upon the university to report on this tragedy as it unfolded. By 2010, mass shootings in America had nearly lost their capacity to shock. And although it was just February, there had already been 15 other mass shootings in 2010.
That's crazy.
But what was kind of notable about this shooting was Amy Bishop was not considered the typical mass shooter. Women rarely commit such killings. And of course, we have Amy being this high achiever since childhood. She was in a stable marriage. She was highly educated, had no history of substance abuse.
Well, and I think oftentimes it happens to this day. People equate intelligence and things like that, these high achievements, with someone who would never do this violent act. You know what I mean? And that's certainly not the case. A lot of times those people have maybe, issues that people don't realize.
Well, she did have a history of violence.
Well, I know, but it's that's why you hear Harvard trained professor shoots. It's it makes a sexy headline because of what I'm describing. People don't expect a professor to be violent like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Amy was suspended without pay retroactively on the day of the attack, and later in a 1-paragraph letter dated February 26th of 2010 was fired. Her termination was effective, backdated to February 12th, the day of the shooting. There was no reason stated in the letter for the firing. I think it's pretty obvious.
Well, it's because of the previous firing of the gun in the conference room.
Amy was charged with 1 count of capital murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. Not exactly sure how that works because she killed 3 people. Roy W. Miller was the lawyer assigned to Bishop when she filed an affidavit of indigency in order after being arrested, saying that she didn't have any money. She stated that neither she or her husband had a job, that her $66,000 a year contract wasn't up until May, that they didn't have any money in the bank or investments, and that they didn't own any property even though they had just paid for a house in cash. Yeah. Colleagues also told investigators that they believed Bishop could have planted some sort of, quote, herpes bomb in the science building.
What?
Yeah, like right after this information comes out about the shooting, people were calling from Boston saying you might want to do some sort of sweep of the building, which police did sweep the building and failed to find any kind of bomb, but they did find that 9mm handgun believed to have been used in the shootings. Bishop had studied the herpes virus in her postdoctoral work at Harvard, and investigators have found that in one of her unpublished novels, she imagined a herpes virus that would cause pregnant women to miscarry. The novel was about a depressed female scientist worried about getting tenure, and she was aided by her researcher named James Anderson.
Yeah, and all they discovered was a smooth-talking, skanky dude named Todd. That was the herpes bomb.
Yeah, so I guess maybe there was some indication in this book that there was like a herpes bomb, so that's why people were warning the university to like be careful.
Oh my gosh.
Now,
But that essentially would be a biological weapon,
yeah,
right?
that's
Yeah.
very scary.
Well, yeah.
Now, Attorney Miller claims that he, quote, couldn't get Anderson to shut up about the case. But Miller was also doing plenty of talking himself to media. He described Amy Bishop as being, quote, a paranoid schizophrenic, but then he later retracted those remarks. He blamed Amy's behavior on her anger at being denied tenure, saying that the, quote, Harvard mentality made it just too hard for her to bear this sort of failure.
Oh, she's just used to doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's because she went to Harvard.
James Anderson blames the tenure system too. He said his wife was worried about ending up like Douglas C. Prasher, a Huntsville biochemist who helped colleagues win a Nobel Prize but ended up driving a shuttle bus after losing out on a grant. Heaven forbid she have to go get a job somewhere else doing
Some of these
something
people
else.
cannot, they can't fathom having to go just get regular, honest work.
Not being able to ride that academic gravy train.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. The police, during their investigation, believed the motive in the shootings were anger at having her tenure denied. But then they also learned of this shooting 24 years earlier in Braintree that left her brother dead. Like, no one seemed to know about this.
Well, yeah, because it was all swept under the rug.
A grand jury indicted Amy on June 16th of 2010 on a first-degree murder charge in the shooting death of her brother, Seth Bishop.
Wow.
Yeah. The district attorney in Massachusetts announced that authorities had failed to do their job back in 1986, so they were going to do it now. A conviction, argued the district attorney, whose name was Keating, he said that might have actually changed Amy Bishop's life and potentially averted this Alabama tragedy.
If she had been held to account then?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Now, 2 days after these charges were brought forth, Amy, who was already sitting in jail, attempted suicide. Amy's father-in-law, Jim Anderson, told media he wished justice had been served back in 1986. So he did not have any kind words for his daughter-in-law. On September 11th of 2012, Amy Bishop pleaded guilty to the charges in Alabama to avoid the death penalty. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Given her sentence in Alabama, prosecutors in Massachusetts declined to extradite her for the murder of Seth Bishop. Amy appealed her sentence on February 11th of 2013. It was rejected, so she remains incarcerated at the Julia Tutwiler prison in Alabama.
Damn, Amy. What the hell? It's like
she wild story.
Well, she comes down there to Alabama and she's not even putting the work in. If you want to be a tenure professor, how about you don't be an asshole to everybody, students and colleagues alike, I mean, that's going to have some bearing on whether or not you're accepted, long term. That's a big deal to give a professor tenure because you basically can't fire them outside of, some very extreme circumstances.
Well, and given her background, which I know she was not like convicted, but just the fact that she shot her brother. I mean, that's a big deal.
Point blank with a shotgun.
And then was a suspect in this pipe bombing. I mean, if that was made like public or these, folks at the university had known this, it's probably likely they wouldn't have even offered her a job.
In the first place.
Yeah.
Well, and this just goes to show, back before the world was so connected, that things like this slipped through the cracks, and you really didn't truly know a person. It was a lot harder to Google their entire past right quick.
But she seems completely unhinged.
She seems,
and she's been indicating for a long time that at any moment something terrible could happen.
Yeah, and it did.
It did. Very tragic. So my resources for today's case, there were some articles in the Boston Globe, also the Huntsville Times, the Chronicle of Higher Education. So a lot of newspaper articles about this story because it is kind of more recent. So
Well, thank you for that.
Boston.com, the New York Times. There was also a Vanity Fair article that I read. So
I'd never heard of Amy Bishop before, so thank you for digging that out of the vault.
yeah, I mean, I know it's not like an unknown case, but maybe people maybe have heard of Dr. Bishop, but they didn't really know, because I knew about the shooting, but I didn't know she shot her brother.
Right.
Like, I didn't know that was a thing. So I did learn a little bit while researching this case.
And just the other day, I heard that the Columbine shooting claimed another victim. A woman passed away, and they said it was linked. After the Columbine incident, she was left in a wheelchair and led to all kinds of other complications.
Oh, yeah.
They actually classified it as homicide.
It was a victim. She was a victim, right?
And she was a victim of the Columbine
Yeah.
shooting, and they classified her recent death as a homicide and attributed it to another victim to the Columbine shooting.
Wow.
So, I mean, it just shows you how devastating these types of events are, you know?
They are.
Even the people that survive are at the very least going to have PTSD and nightmares, right? And unfortunately, they may have, physical complications the rest of their life.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine that you're shot in the face and you're able to just sort of like walk away from that without having some kind of
You would think.
ongoing or, medical problems that would persist
Right.
beyond that.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. We skipped our midweek,
We did.
but we'll try to drop another episode, Dylan, for our listeners.
We will.
All right. Bye, Dylan.
Bye.